All right. Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to Try This First. This is the series where I'm talking with nonprofit experts and we are talking about different aspects of fundraising and nonprofit operations and figuring out things that you can do kind of right away to get started in this world. There's a lot to cover and a lot to cover in today's conversation. I am talking with Robin Sinclair from the Fieldstone Leadership Network. I've known Robin for a very long time and had the good fortune of being able to work with a couple Fieldstone programs. And it's a great organization. Robin's a huge resource in the nonprofit community. And today we're going to talk about nonprofit boards. Nonprofit boards are one of those things that every nonprofit has a board. Not every nonprofit knows what to do with their board or how to manage their board or even how to evaluate their board's success. But there's things we can do to get started, and that's what we're going to do today is really start from zero and move on from there. So, Robin, welcome. And the big question, of course, is if someone out there is ready to start really working with their board, or maybe to start improving their board, or maybe it's their first time with a board, what do they try first? How do we begin?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is super exciting. So I appreciate and I do love working with you. Um, I like to always lead with curiosity. I feel that, and this goes with almost everything that I do, and that means asking questions and trying to understand and kind of putting on my empathy hat. So I start by asking my existing board, why are they involved? Why did they come to the organization? What drove them? What was their motivating factor? And then when we talk about adding to the board, the first thing I ask them is, why are you interested in joining our board? I have a funny story that one time I was with an organization that had a name in the title that oftentimes was confused with another organization. So I sat with a person for probably a half an hour because he was interested in joining my board, and come to find out at the end of my asking him questions, he thought he was joining a completely different organization's board. So if I hadn't have asked those questions, it could have been quite possible that he could have shown up to the board development committee thinking he was joining a completely different organization. So for me, what I do first is I always lead with curiosity and empathy and trying to just understand, what their motivation is and why they either have joined or why they are joining.
Love that. And that motivation is so important. I've worked with a number of board members and encouraged them to really own and practice their story of why they joined that particular board. Not memorizing an elevator pitch or a script, but really having their own personal story because that's what people respond to. It's a great fundraising tool as well.
Yeah, I remember it being referred to as inspiring evangelism. And
Oh,
if you
yeah.
can, get them to be as fired up as you are, then they're going to go out and share the story with their friends. But if they don't have that calling like we do,
Yes.
being part of the organization, I find that it can fall flat. And it doesn't take long for somebody to understand or realize that the motivation is not, they're not there for the right reasons. And so I
Right.
think it's really important to understand, like, well, where do they see this organization going? What do they see the future hold? What does that look like? And I think by asking even your current board members, you can also identify some gaps, and opportunities for growth within your organization. So I make a point of having regular check-ins with my board and just, asking them, these are board members that have been on for some time. So it's not always just the new ones, but are we still meeting your needs? Are we still connecting with what you want? And because people, they do change, and some,
Yeah.
somebody has a health problem and they suddenly join another organization with a health focus, and that's good and that's to be expected. And we can't take that personally, but the only way we're going to know that is by regular check-ins and those questions that we can
And
ask
those check-ins are this is you're not talking about the board meetings. These are one-on-one
one-on-one.
conversations.
Catching up. Yep. Over tea, over coffee. I'll come to their office, but it's just such a great way for them to check in with me. So there should be no surprises.
Yeah,
So when you get that call that says, hey, I'm going to leave the board, you don't take it personally. You understand what's going on in their life. And again, then that gives you an opportunity to see if it's something that you could have done differently. So
right.
it speaks to that assessment And I know, you and I feel very strongly about assessing the board
Yes.
and evaluating and finding out, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where are your opportunities? So I think if we do this on a regular basis, again, there should be no surprises.
Yeah. That's a good point too, because sometimes in my experience, sometimes we need to give people, it's almost like giving them permission or giving them an option for moving on from a board. A lot of people, the story I always tell, it's not board related, but when I was a kid, I played soccer. There's a point to this, I promise. When I was a kid, I played soccer for a number of years. I wasn't terribly good, but I was committed. My father was my coach. And what turned out to be my last year playing this kind of club league soccer, I really didn't want to play and really didn't want to be doing it. But in my head, I thought, well, my dad is my coach and he really is going to want to coach again. And so I don't want to let him down. And it was only until afterwards that I found out my father had pretty much the same exact, story in his head that he didn't want to coach anymore, but he didn't want to let me down. So we both ended up doing a thing for a year that neither of us really wanted to do. And I think sometimes our board members are like that too. They may be ready to move on or change something, but maybe they don't feel like they know how. And those kind of curious and open conversations you're talking about really open that door for someone to say, yeah, this doesn't fit my needs anymore, and I need to move on. And it's not, like you said, not personal. It's not a judgment against the nonprofit or against your skill as leader. It's just kind of the way things go.
It's the evolution. And it's really,
Yeah.
as good leaders, I think we need to treat our staff the same way. When a staff member comes to us and says there's an opportunity for growth, we don't stand in their way. We want to develop leaders. We want them to
Oh
go out in
yeah,
the community and grow. Why should we not apply that to our board?
absolutely. That's a great perspective. So what are some of the other like core things you want to make sure you have in place if maybe you're a new nonprofit, you're starting to build your board? What are some of those foundational elements that you think are really important to make a board successful and strong over the long term?
I think you have to have a really strong mission, vision, and value statement.
Okay.
That's your North Star. And so if you cannot clearly articulate your mission statement, for example, you will have a hard time communicating that to your board member. And
Yes.
if the board member doesn't understand it, they're not going to be able to go out into the community and really be your ambassador. So I think you have to really be on the same page with that. And I
Mhm.
always really start with my vision, where you want to be. And then we do that by the mission. And I think that the
Yes.
vision is what's exciting. Mission is what you do, and that's important, but the vision is where you're going. And I think people love the vision. So I think
Absolutely.
you have to have those three, the value statements as well. Like, what is really important to you? What are your core beliefs, your core philosophies? So I think that that's the most important part. And then, certainly have a good case for support.
Hmm.
Make sure that, you can articulate what the need is. And, there's so much talk now around not focusing on the crisis or not focusing on the negativity and focus on the positive and the storytelling. But there
Yeah.
has to be an identified need. So I think you need to be able to really clearly articulate that. I have, and it speaks to that evaluation piece. If you can sense that your board member is starting to drift, you know, provide a mission moment for them and make sure that they connect with maybe one of your clients. And if it's ethical and appropriate, if you're working with small children, that might not be right. But,
Hmm. Hmm.
in our case, I try to bring one of our success stories to every one of our board meetings. And if I feel that a board member is not that engaged, I will make sure that I lead with a mission moment so that I can really connect them and tie them. And we're not a direct services organization. We're a capacity building organization. We help organizations to be stronger. So I have to work a little harder to find those mission moments for my
Hmm.
board. But when I can show them their impact and what they're doing for our organizations out there, they light up. They just completely light up. So I think it's up to us. We know this stuff. I think the numbers are something like 2,080 hours in a work year. And that's conservative. You figure
Wow.
most CEOs are probably upwards of 3,000 plus. A board member, if you only meet 3 or 4 times a year, and you maybe have a couple committee meetings. I mean, do the math. At best, you're talking 25, 30 hours a year. So
Right.
our amount of knowledge, I mean, we live, eat, and breathe this stuff.
Yes.
They just get a little piece of it. So we have to really maximize the time that we spend with them and make sure that they really get the information that is in our head in a way that they can go out and spread the word. So I think clarity is so important.
Yes.
I was
Absolutely.
doing some impact study work recently with one of our nonprofit leaders, and she said, "Don't focus even on the names of your programs because most board members aren't going to remember the names of your programs. So focus on the impact.
Yeah.
And I thought it just was like the light bulb went off for me. So I have to be very clear in my communication with my board, both, bringing on a new board member and managing and, keeping my board members super engaged by being really clear in my communication of what is our impact in the community.
That's a really great point. I hadn't thought about that, about avoiding like technical names for programs and really talking about the impact. But yeah, it makes total sense. Our board members are immersed in our world in so infrequently, and then they're kind of dipping in and dipping out again. And if we hold them accountable for a level of knowledge and involvement equal to our own, we're only going to be disappointed, and they're going to be frustrated too, because they're going to feel like they're being tested on a subject they haven't studied for, and no one's happy. But yeah,
Exactly.
to meet them where they are and really take advantage of their or maximize their engagement, that makes a lot of sense,
Mhm.
because that kind of dovetails into just the concept of being clear about your expectations in general. Like when your board members are, or when volunteers are considering joining the board, having really clear expectations about, this is what our board does, this is what we'll need you to do, this is what you can expect from the staff. Even a very simple bullet pointed list
Mhm.
can make a huge difference of being clear and helping our board members prepare
Mhm.
for those meetings and those engagements.
It just has to be super, super simple.
Yeah.
And I'm not at all intimating like dumbing it down. That is not at all what I'm saying. It's just like you said, they come in, they parachute in, they parachute out. They've got day jobs.
Yeah.
Most of them have really important jobs, and that's why we love their expertise. So, as you said earlier, meeting them where they're at. If you have a board member that has an expertise in the legal field, bring them in that area, bring them in an HR area, bring them in if, whatever, wherever their roles are. So when you are recruiting your board, and you want to try to find some areas of expertise that can help you, people love being needed. They love
Mhm.
offering service, especially, I used to say, a lot of our jobs out there are pushing paper all day long.
Yeah.
And we get the joy and the beauty of working in a nonprofit community where you're working with really good people, and you're working with people that are mission driven, and our clients are so important, and the impact that we have is so great. If they don't get those joyful moments all the time in their day jobs. So it's up to us to bring those joyful moments to them. And many times they'll say, oh, I'm not a fundraiser. I don't want to go out and ask for money. And, that's when you say it's not about asking for money. It's just telling the story. It's, and go back to that initial question. Why did you join our board? And listen to those stories. And if they say, oh, I love your organization. I had one board member tell me with regards to Fieldstone, I can't join 20 boards, but I can join Fieldstone's board and I impact hundreds of organizations in Orange
Right.
County. I mean, he gets it. Like
Yeah.
that's it.
And
And
that's
so
right to impact again. Yeah.
completely. And so could he name my programs? Probably not. So again, it's managing my expectations. He's not going to name my programs, but
Right.
what a great story. And that's why he's going to continue to be involved, and why he's going to go out and tell his friends about the organization.
That's great. And I love what you said about fundraising, because yeah, that's another kind of hot topic, right? So there's some organizations that really feel, and this I feel like this might be kind of an older point of view, that the role of the board member is to ask their peers for money directly. And I've not seen that be effective across the board. Forgive the pun, but every now and again, there's individuals who are like, yeah, this is what I like to do. I want to talk to my friends and bring them along. But for the most part, I don't think people are super comfortable with that. And as we see more and more organizations invest in a fundraising professional on staff, that really is that person's role is to bring that professionalism and that focus. So the board member then, yeah, becomes the ambassador and the champion. And maybe they don't make the actual ask, but if they're consistently bringing people in and inviting them in to attend events or to learn or to take tours or to meet with the leadership team, whatever path that looks like, that's a great pathway to fundraising right there.
And it becomes more about relationships and less about transactions, which is what we all want to do. And that's really how you build
Absolutely.
that culture of philanthropy throughout an organization.
Yeah.
That's sort of the danger of having a development department, because then everybody says, oh, I don't need to do that because there's already somebody in the organization that's doing that. I remember being in an organization and we didn't want to have a fund development committee because of that very reason, because every board member wanted to own it. And they said,
Yeah.
if we do it, that, potentially we could sit back and then just say, well, those people will handle it. So if everybody is out there just bringing people in, it's less, as you said, about that fundraising transaction, because nobody likes to do that. It's not a comfortable, and nor should they. So again, it's up
Yeah.
to us to manage our expectations on that.
Yeah. Again, back to expectations. And I think that's probably the heart of board success, really, is that those clear, everyone knows their role, everyone knows what's being asked of them, because we're really bringing, when you think about what we really need board members for, as you said earlier, like they've got outside expertise, they have outside networks, and they have a passion for the cause you're aligned around. And it's really finding a way to get those three things connected and triangulated and moving in the right direction. That's where you're going to see some action. But if you, I think the boards that feel unsuccessful, or the organizations that struggle with their boards, I think that comes from they don't know what to do with their board members. So they get them in a room for a meeting, and the meeting is just a report out where it's just reading things to them, and there's no real
No
um,
engagement.
yeah, there's no real engagement. There's no real realization, or no one's taking advantage of the fact that, hey, we've got, 5, 10, 15, whatever it is, community members who have all raised their hands and said, this mission's important to me, and I'm going to give you my time, I'm going to give you my money, I'm going to give you my knowledge. And if we're wasting that, it does make it leads to dissatisfaction and probably a not really effective board.
Mhm. And I think it starts with us as the leaders of the organization. I mean, we cannot just sit back and expect the board to come in and do all the heavy lifting. I mean, it's sort of like building a house without a contractor. So,
Yeah.
you really need to be very clear, as you said, with your expectations, with your, you know, just the basic how to. Most board members don't know what to do. I mean, I was working with a board chair that had never been a board chair before. And you talk about imposter syndrome. He just thought everybody on the board knew what they were doing but him. He thought he was the only one that had no idea.
Right.
And just was like paralyzed by fear, because he
Yeah.
just thought, I'm not worthy. I shouldn't even be on this board. And yet he had so much to give. And so I really think it's up to the CEO, the executive director, to really prepare that, do the onboarding properly, talk about the expectations, connect with them on a regular basis. One organization that I work with had a buddy system set up. So they had, a more senior, not by age, but a more senior board member connect with a new board
Tenured.
member.
Yeah.
Tenured, thank you. So I like that much better. So they had, a buddy system. And so, had that system been in place with that board that I was working with, I think that would not have been such a challenge for that person, because he completely felt in over his head. He felt like he had just completely oversold and was under delivering.
And now he's in trouble. I love that idea of the buddy system. I've seen that in some boards as well. I think it's a pretty simple thing to set up. If you're, even if you're a small nonprofit, you could still set it up pretty easily and put the onus on the board member, like, hey, between, Sally and Jane, you're partnered up for this month, between, in the next 30 days, you guys should get together and have a cup of coffee. That's pretty much, it can be as simple as that. But the outcome is you're helping those board members build trust with one another. And again, going back to your point, Robin, at the very beginning of this call, is that the board members come together so relatively infrequently. If you're sitting around a table of people and you don't really know all or any of them, that might hold you back from volunteering your full ideas, or questioning things, because you might be like the example you shared, feeling like, oh, all these people are experts, I have to hold back. Well, no, we want all our board members to be in and engaged and building trust and building community. It's a great way to do that. And events or systems like that buddy system, easy, great way to do it. Great way to do it.
Yeah.
Are there other aspects of like fundamental board work that people should kind of keep in mind if they're new to this type of work?
I just think as much inclusion as possible, even down to the agenda. You don't need to create the agenda.
Yeah.
Sit down with your board chair before the meeting and say, what would you like to communicate, to the board? How would you like to engage, your fellow board members? So I think, as CEOs, we tend to just feel that we have to own it all. We have to create the whole board manual. We have to create all the, as you say, expectation documents. You have to create the conflict of interest policy, the confidentiality statement, that we have to do all of that. And it can be very daunting. And so why not include your board in the very beginning of this on all of the onboarding and talk about, what again, leading with questions, with
Yeah.
curiosity. What was your onboarding situation like? What did that feel like to you? And they might say, oh, you know what? I saw Steve, at church and he said, I need to join the board and here I am. So, and then you could say, okay, well, how could that have looked differently? What would have been better for you? Tell me about your first board meeting. How comfortable did you feel sharing and when it came time to the sharing session? And they might say, I was not going to raise my hand because I didn't know enough about the organization.
Right.
Okay, so, and then, back to the mission statement. Can they articulate the mission statement? So maybe just one board meeting, you just talk about the mission statement, break them up into pairs. There's all kinds of exercises that you can do to engage a board more. But I think it's just really important to include them as much as possible. So you're not just asking them for money and you're not just asking them to introduce you to their friends that have means.
Yeah.
Because eventually, they start to feel like an ATM machine. And then talk about being transactional. That's all it is. But when it's relational, they will stay, they will do everything. My board will do anything that they can to help me because they so believe in the mission.
Right.
And I think that, we need to really ask them, like, why are you with us and why are you staying? Kind of like a stay interview with staff. Why are you continuing to come to work every day? Why do you come to our board meetings? And so I think it's just really important to engage them as much as possible, even in the little tasks of, like I said, creating the agenda.
I love that. And really a great point about, maybe you use some meeting time for some of this foundational work. It doesn't necessarily, the meeting itself is your meeting. You can use it and maximize that time. If it's, 90 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever it is, you can really maximize that time. I've used meeting time in the past to have the board members practice their story of why they belong, why they chose this board. And just like you said, we had them, write it, work quietly, work on their own, and then did some pair and share where they were working with a partner, and then shared a big group, and it helped people really kind of get a hold of it. And it did it in a place where we were all together and we're all in community and we can all help each other out. And I love your point about, going back, having those curious questions and asking those questions about process. How was it when you started? How did it feel? And adjusting your own processes to match those, because you do have to have. I think one of the things I'm hearing from you, Robin, is like it's this real combination of personalized connections, of taking the time to learn about and build relationships with your board members, at the same time building systems that support the things you want supported. Like, this is our onboarding process. This is our buddy system. This is how once a year we're going to sit down and talk about your experience as being a board member. These are our bylaws. This is our gift acceptance. Like, all that kind of foundational documentation has to be in place, but that can't do it alone. It has to be built on or built alongside that kind of personal touch, that curiosity.
Absolutely. And the only other thing I would add to that is to just be very aware and intentional that, once you create this process, that's not your process for life. You yourself, I myself have to be open to adjusting where needed. I used to have, we used to talk about the laminated lesson plans that, a teacher that taught for 35 years, she taught 1 year, laminated her lesson plans, and then taught that way for 30 years. She didn't teach for 30 years. She taught 1 year and then did the same thing for 30 years. And so I think about that when I do any of the things that I do, that just because I do it one time doesn't mean that is now the procedure and the process that we're always going to do things. So just be aware that they might have a better idea than you have, and that's okay. And we have, again, you want to have that kind of culture of curiosity where it's like, okay, can I change this? Is there a better way to do things?
Because there's things we want to hold tight and remain steadfast on, like, fidelity to the mission and program alignment to the mission. Like, and that's really talking about the board. The board is kind of there to be your lighthouse, your guardrail, to make sure that fidelity to the mission continues. But all the other stuff, most of the other stuff, I've told clients to think of things not in terms of construction, where you build a building and the building is built and now you're done, but in terms of fitness, where if you want to be healthy, there's things you have to do all the time.
Right.
You don't just, knock out a couple push-ups and be like, well,
That's it.
that's sorted, done. Heck, moving on. I don't need to worry about that anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of our nonprofit work is in that same space. Like, yeah, this worked once. And let's make sure we have that culture of, you called it a culture of curiosity, a culture of evaluation is another one where like everything has to be, got to take a look at everything. There's nothing that can go without review.
Right. Is it relevant today? I think it's
Hmm.
something that we need to check in and really monitor, and that relationship, again, by having those regular check-ins. Maybe that's one of your questions, and ask, the board chair, is what we do does that continue to serve us? Is it
Yes.
relevant? But I do appreciate you saying, obviously the mission cannot change,
Right.
that is your mission. Unless you make some big decision, then definitely you stick with that.
Yeah. That's pretty rare, I think. Um, Fantastic. I love that. The only other thing I'll put on the pile of good ideas that you've already thrown out there is because you mentioned fundraising, and so a lot of the nonprofits might be thinking or hearing about the concept of board members having a give or a get or a give get policy. Robin, how have you encountered those in your experience, and what are your thoughts on that?
I've worked with some organizations that had a great give get, and it was a healthy give get, and that was the expectation when they came on, and it was very clear, and they were fine with that. I worked with another organization that was not the expectation
Hmm.
when they came on. And so there was tremendous resistance when that was introduced. And to this day, they do not have a formal give get, because it just didn't work for them, because the culture of the organization was such that that would just not have worked. And nobody, they didn't want to lose good board members over something like that. So, and they're all incredibly generous, and they do wonderful work with the organization without having a formal policy. So I think it's situational. I
Yeah.
know that nobody ever really loves that answer, but I really do think it depends on the organization. I think with a new organization, and if you're forming a new board, I do think it's a good expectation to set. But
Hmm.
again, lead with curiosity. Ask your board members, the ones that are coming on and starting with you, how does this sit with you? Does
Yeah.
this feel right? And if they agree and start maybe with 5 board members, then that's the expectation there, and then it can grow. It's
Right.
really hard to implement it if there has not been that expectation set at the beginning.
And I think that's a great point. I agree. It's not a one size fits all situation. A one turn of phrase that I've seen be really useful when you're talking about board members and giving is setting the expectation that a board member makes every year makes a meaningful and personal gift to the organization. And I've always liked that combination of words because
Mhm.
meaningful means it's meaningful to the donor. And so that's not, if you put a number on paper, that's the number, and that's what people are going to think about. And it's going to be either a number that's easy for someone to reach or just okay or really hard. And if it's really hard, that might create feelings of like, well, you don't need me, you don't want me on this board because I don't have enough money. Like
Right,
that opens up a whole conversation that you might not really want to have. But if I
right.
say it's meaningful to you, then it's meaningful to you. And it's personal, meaning it comes from it's your gift. It's not, I got my bank to write a check for you. It's your gift. So
I
meaningful
love that.
personal could be a way to get there. That still gives some ability to be appropriate for the person in question. So
I love that.
it's,
I love that, because I have seen that where I one time almost lost a really, really good board member because he said, I don't have the means that other people on the board have. And he felt that, you talked about, again, the imposter syndrome really kicked in when it came to that personal financial gift. And he was so important to the organization and added such value in so many different ways. And it was meaningful. And I had
yeah,
that conversation with him, and he stayed. But
good.
if it had
Yeah.
just been that cut and dry, black and white, he probably would have left, and it would have been a real loss to the organization.
And I think that's another kind of old school framework for building a board is that you just need to fill the board with people with money.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be, you see this more and more. I think your board should be filled with people who are just passionate about what you do and
Yeah.
are bold and unafraid to tell the story in whatever room they're in. Like I'll take that over net worth alone anytime. Obviously, it'd be great if they had both, but in the reality, like, yeah, if you only select board members based on capacity to give, then you are kind of setting a precedent that that's the most important thing. And I don't know if that's necessarily true for a board, because that passion, that curiosity, that connection to the community and the cause, I think are also very, very important.
Yeah, I think you'll just really miss out on some special people out there if that's what you focus on 100%.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Well, before we wrap up completely, I do want to make a little plug here that some of you might know that Robin and I, and as well as Sarah Neely from Orange Door Consulting, worked together and created what I think is a pretty cool little program called Align and Accelerate, and it's designed to provide nonprofit boards with tailored evaluation and implementation. And think of it like a strategic plan only for your board, specifically for your board. And Robin was instrumental in creating this program and building a system whereby we sit down with board members and boards and really determine the big problems that they're facing. And then we help them solve those problems, either through creating new policy or providing training or coaching. It's really exciting. And I want to just, as always, publicly thank Robin for her genius in helping us bring this all together. So thanks, Robin. It was great.
Oh, it was a lot of fun to work with you.
It was fun. I loved it. So before we go, Robin, tell us a little bit about Fieldstone and about where people can find out more about what you guys do.
So Fieldstone Leadership Network has been around for 3 decades, actually almost 4 decades. We used to be a grant maker many, many years ago as Fieldstone Foundation, for those of you that remember us in the giving days. Home builders back in the day, and the principals were incredibly generous and philanthropic and felt very blessed by their good fortune and paid it back to the community. And so they made grants for many years. And in giving grants, they would ask the leaders, in addition to money, what else do you need? And they said, we need professional development for our leaders. Our leaders are working in silos, they're isolated, they need to find their people and come together. So about 30 years ago, they created curriculum and they started having peer learning groups. And then they added the executive coaching program, which you participated in. And then we had added speaker series, and now we've got team building. We're doing team building / strategic goal setting for full day retreats. We've got a leadership book club. So our vision is to multiply the impact of all of the Orange County nonprofits. And we do that by connecting, empowering, and supporting our nonprofit leaders. And as you know, it can be very lonely out there. And so you need your people. And I went through the program as a new executive director back in 2008, and I don't know what I would have done. The Great Recession hit, and I had my people in my cohort, and these were, we call it Fieldstone Confidential. We could talk about very open and vulnerable situations, and we knew that it wasn't going to go outside of that room. And then the following year, I participated in the executive coaching program. And then I had the good fortune almost 8 years ago to come and work at Fieldstone. So if you are interested in knowing more, you can go to our website, which is Fieldstone Leadership Network. Oh, I'm drawing a blank, fieldstoneoc.org. We changed our website just recently because Fieldstone Leadership Network was so long, fieldstoneoc.org. You can find me on LinkedIn, Robin Sinclair. I'm happy to talk to you to determine, what you might need. Some people need coaching before they need a peer cohort. Some people need their people before they need coaching. But we have quarterly happy hours. And I feel that our differentiator, and I've really been spending a lot of time thinking about this, what sets us apart from some of the other capacity building organizations is we provide that safe space, and you're in a network. And once you're in our network, you're in our network as long as you choose to be. And there really isn't anybody that does it like that. So I'm happy to jump on a call with anyone and work with you and join you and welcome you in our network.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I'll double that. I mean, and if you're out there and you're a new leader, definitely check out Fieldstone. Or if you've got up and coming leaders in your organization, talk to Fieldstone about different ways you can help them. Because that's a great investment in your team. I know I've worked for places that invested in the team through Fieldstone, and it always made a big difference. So,
and not just a new leader, we bring people in that have been doing the work for 20 to 25 years because it's all about reciprocity.
yeah,
And we can use your expertise around that table. We've had some leaders that participated 20 years ago, and they've done it again just a couple of years ago because they need a whole new network of their peers. So
great.
yeah, doesn't matter how long you've been in the industry. If you're brand new or you're seasoned, we'd love to have you in our groups.
I love that. I love it. And again, to recap a little bit here, what we talked about today, if you're new to working with a board, or you've got a new board, or you're just looking to re-engage the board, some of the things that you can start trying today are having those curious conversations with your board members. Talk to them about their story. Why are they on the board? What about the mission speaks to them? Get their opinion on how your processes are going, and then adjust your processes to make them more sustainable and strong. There's a lot you can do by really indulging, not indulging, but embracing that idea of being curious about your board and remembering to manage your expectations about what your board members know about what your mission is, what your board members know about how you do. Don't bombard them with jargon and acronyms and program names. Let's really talk about impact, and let's really make the most out of these opportunities we have to work with these board members who are passionate and engaged with us. So get started, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's no time like the present.
No time like the present. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll have more Try This First soon. And Robin, thanks again for sharing all your knowledge with us. And we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.